for taking time on a Friday evening to come for this conversation. This congregation has been in the village of Placitas for 120 years now. And as I was driving here this evening, I was thinking, surely the people of this place have seen many an issue come and go through the life of this village, all of which are important. So I welcome you into this important conversation this evening. I invite you into this place of peace and into a place of deep listening. I think that would do us all good as we deal with a touchy issue about which we all have passions that come from different sides. So come into this place of peace, welcome into a place of deep listening, and I hope that we give the same importance to how we treat each other as to the importance that we give to how we deal with this important issue. So welcome, and thank you for taking the time to be here tonight.
Well, thank you, Pastor. I like the way you said peace and deep listening. I'm Tony Hull, and I'm a resident of Placitas, and I'm a member of the Sandoval County Task Force on Horses. I want to thank you all for being here this evening, and I'm pleased to welcome you and so you can all hear a success story where a community as diverse as Placitas, and also in a fragile ecosystem, has developed a management plan which provided a humane and effective way for the people and the land to coexist with these horses. Karen McAlpine is Executive Director of the Corolla Wild Horse Fund and will describe not only what has been accomplished with wild horses there, but how it was done. While there are differences between Corolla and Placitas, there are also many similarities. Karen has been called upon twice to provide expert testimony on wild horses to the Congress of the United States. And has lectured across the country on the management of wild horses. Immediately before coming to Placitas, Karen participated in the Northeast Wild Horse Adoption Conference in Boston. We'll hear both about the success story at Corolla and an existence proof of a humane solution that satisfies what many consider here and which have the specifics that many have experienced here and which have made Corolla a success. Karen will entertain questions from all after the presentation tonight. The question and answer period is not a debate, nor a format to express individual views, but intended to provide hands-on, vetted information. Please save your questions for that period. We ask that your questions will be written on a 3x5 card. They'll be available at the break if you haven't already picked up some. And we'll take a few minutes after the talk to collect these questions and provide them to Karen. At that time, you can get refreshments. There's water and a place to put recyclables out there. For those of you who are interested and would like to see the presentation again, or friends who cannot make it, the presentation will be recorded in entirety and be available on YouTube. So I want to let you know that it's available. So several of us have had the privilege of spending some time with Karen and her husband Mike in Placitas. After hearing her insights, I'm confident that you all will find her discussion interesting and relevant. I want to welcome Karen.
I'm not very tall, so I hope you can all see me. And then after I do my presentation, I have a mic, so I'll move around when you're asking questions, so it'll be a little easier to interact. I thank you all for coming. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize and thank Tony Hall, Joan Fennicle, Laura Robbins, and Sandy Johnson for arranging to bring me here and for their warm hospitality. I'd also like to recognize and thank all the other residents of Placitas who care so deeply about the quality of life and the future of the wild horses that are an integral part of what makes Placitas so unique. I have had the pleasure of walking both the east and west sides of Placitas, and I was blessed to see dozens of horses, as well as their habitat. I have been managing a herd of wild horses whose numbers have ranged from 84 to 144. Our current population is 101. We have never rounded up or removed a single horse. We have never broken up a single family. We have no natural predators. We do not have lush grasses, and abundant forage. What we do have is a management plan that works. That is what I am here to do and to share with you tonight. Before we begin, I need to share something else with you. My husband and I were returning to Tony Hall's house today. When we turned on to Algodon Drive, we were met by multiple police cars and a livestock trailer. Shortly, we watched a motorcade pass on the road below Tony's house. It was filled with terrified horses. I have never seen such a thing. Those horses have lost their freedom forever. I watched them pass by, terrified and huddled together in the trailer with their escort, and it broke my heart. I'd like to show you a short video demonstrating the past and present of the wild horses that we successfully manage on a narrow barrier island between the Atlantic Ocean and the Currituck Sound. The wild horses of North Carolina's Currituck Outer Banks have survived nearly 5 centuries of devastating hurricanes, fierce nor'easters, swarms of biting insects, poisonous snakes, and now humans. In 1926, as you saw in the film, there were 5,000 wild horses all up and down the 175 miles of our barrier island. As I mentioned earlier, the current herd size of registered colonial Spanish Mustangs now is 101. Until 1985, the horses of Corolla freely roamed over 17,000 acres of sparsely populated land. But the construction of a 16-mile, 2-lane highway brought the construction of thousands of vacation rental homes and thousands of visitors to rent them. It also brought the death of 20 horses hit by speeding vehicles. In 1989, a small group of concerned community members met at the local fire station, and the Corolla Wild Horse Fund was created that night. Working together with local, state, and federal government, the community came together to raise enough funds and acquire the necessary permissions and permits to construct 2 sound-asleep fences and to move the remaining horses to 7,500 acres north of the most populated areas of Corolla. In 2001, the all-volunteer grassroots organization incorporated as a 501c3 not-for-profit. In late 2006, I was hired as the first full-time executive director, along with a full-time herd manager and a part-time office manager. We received no state or federal funding, and we raised our entire budget ourselves with the exception of a modest grant from our county. Although Corolla and Placitas are nearly 2,000 miles apart, we have more similarities than we have differences. The habitat for the horses of Corolla is harsh. They have had to adapt to a specialized diet of sea oats, coarse sand and salt-covered grasses, acorns, bulrush, marsh, and meadow grasses. Your wild horses have adapted and survived on what grasses and plants are available to them. Our wild horses are not owned by anyone. Your wild horses are not owned by anyone. Both populations have survived despite the odds. And so how does a community manage wild horses? When the remaining Corolla horses were moved north of the populated areas, the community and major landowners came together in 1997 to formulate a management plan. The signatories on the plan are Currituck County, local government, United States Fish and Wildlife Service, federal government, the North Carolina National Estuarine Research Reserve, state government, and the not-for-profit Corolla Wild Horse Fund. It is a living document and can be modified at any time. We meet quarterly, and we formally review the plan once every 5 years. In addition, we have a written agreement with our county commissioners that designates the Corolla Wild Horse Fund as the management entity for the wild horses. In 2009, we initiated a contraception program similar to the program that has been in place on Assateague Island in Maryland, which is a national park, for the last 20 years. We all recognized that without population control, our herd size could rapidly exceed the capacity of our habitat to support them. Capture and removal should never be a method of population control when a humane and cost-effective method is easily initiated. The Corolla Wild Horse Fund uses native PZP. Porcine zona pellucida is a protein readily destroyed by digestion. It's mixed with an adjuvant and delivered remotely by dart. The dart is 1.25 inches long. It hits the mare in the hip, delivers the 1 cc dose, and falls out. The dart is fluorescent and easily retrieved. PZP protocols have been reviewed by the Food and Drug Administration and the Humane Society of the United States for 20 years. Horses are neither injured by this drug, nor do social behaviors change. There is absolutely no danger to humans. PZP works by stimulating the mare's body to produce antibodies, similar to the process that occurs when you get a flu shot. The mare becomes protected from pregnancy. It is 95% effective. It is safe for pregnant animals, and it's reversible if not used for more than 5 consecutive years. It is no longer considered experimental for horses. After the initial dose, a booster is administered 3 weeks to 8 months later, and then only once annually. PZP only costs $25 per treatment, and more often than not, the cost is underwritten by the ASPCA, the Humane Society of the United States, and private foundations. The results? Drastic reduction in foal and mare mortality, significantly increased longevity and health, and the preservation of herd genetics and band families. The Kerala Wild Horse Fund has also initiated a successful nationwide adoption program for horses that must be removed for life-threatening illnesses, critical injuries, or extreme habituation. We gentle and saddle train our horses, unless they are too young, and have a stringent adoption program with requirements and follow-up. We have successfully placed 64 horses since 2007. They are not all just companion animals. As you saw in the video, many have become outstanding event, trail, dressage, jumpers, and more. If wild horses weren't already world-class athletes, they would not survive. We also work closely with our county commissioners and our sheriff's department. And in 1989, a wild horse ordinance was created to protect both the horses and the public. It is enforced by our sheriff's department, and I hire off-duty police officers in the summer months, and they become outstanding educators in the field. We have a website, a Facebook page with over 18,000 likes, and we educate over 300,000 visitors in our 2 mission-related stores. All this has evolved from a group of dedicated community residents who came together with a vision. Horses built our country, our states, and our towns. They have carried us in peace and in war. They have written our history. Look into their eyes. There you will see generations of horses who have faithfully served humans for thousands of years, asking very little in return. Our wild horses need and deserve to be managed and protected in a unified and effective manner. They are nobody's horses, but they are everybody's horses. Any management plan must be crafted with what is best for the wild horses as its motivation. The Kerala Wild Horse Fund is living proof that a community can come together and create a workable, successful management plan for its wild horses. I know that the village of Placitas and its neighbors can and should do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I'm sure there'll be questions and things that many people would like to hear more about. And if you have not already received one of the index cards, please pick up one and write your questions down. And we'll be reading them, and Karen will be responding to them. And again, there's water outside if you'd like refreshments. We'll take a break for a few minutes, then we'll come back and reconvene with the questions and answers. Thank you. An informative question and answer period. We're about to begin, and we're going to have readers of the questions, and if there are duplicate questions, your exact wording may not be read. They may be combined. There are several questions that came up from multiple people. But we're about to begin, and Karen, if you would take over the podium.
I think I can just stand here. Can you hear me? I'll stand there. I'm sorry. Thank you.
We do have a lot of questions, and some of the handwriting is a little difficult, so please bear with us. And my assistant Tina here is going to help.
As much as I can.
Okay, first question. How is it legal for anyone in Placitas to lure or bait free-roaming horses onto their fenced and posted property by operating gates, using hay and feed as lures, and then incarcerating these animals. Under what law, local, county, state, federal, is this permitted?
Well, that's a difficult one for me to answer because I don't know your local laws. As I understand them, that New Mexico is a fence-out state, and if you don't want animals on your property, it is your responsibility to fence them out. And where I live, we have an ordinance that was put in place in 1989 that makes it illegal to lure, entice, harass, or remove a wild horse from its habitat.
Could a legal reform of legal Placitas residents declaring their desire to allow free roaming horses to exist within Placitas boundaries stop the New Mexico Livestock Board, BLM, state, or any other government agencies from interfering with this resolution?
Could you read that again?
No.
It was a long,
You want me to read it?
sorry.
Okay, no, I'll read it.
Thank you.
Could a legal referendum of legal Placitas residents declaring their desire to allow free roaming horses to exist within Placitas boundaries stop the New Mexico Livestock Board, BLM, state, or any other government agency from interfering with that resolution?
Say that 3 times fast.
Again, because I'm not a New Mexican, and I don't know your laws. I know that our wild horse ordinance, which is a county ordinance, is strong enough to stop exactly what she just stated. No one can get within 50 feet, lure, entice, harass, remove a horse unless it is an employee of the Corolla Wild Horse Fund, a law enforcement officer, or a veterinarian, and that is only in the course of providing treatment or interacting with the horse for its benefit. I would suggest, and I've had this conversation with some others, that legal is always the way to go. You have elected officials here that you can work with. That's what we did. We went to the county, we went to the state, and we are now at the federal level with legislation that has passed the United States House twice. Hasn't gone through the Senate, but I don't feel that special because nothing else has either. But that certainly doesn't mean that we're going to go away and give up, and we're working behind the scenes. In North Carolina, we have a General Assembly. The General Assembly is preparing a resolution that will go to the Senate, asking them to pass our bill, which is the Corolla Wild Horses Protection Act. I see no reason why, as unified citizens, you could not do something similar.
Okay, next one is, after what you saw today, where do you start to change the minds and hearts of horse killers?
I don't know that you're ever going to change the hearts of horse haters and killers. I don't think that's possible. But you can educate everyone and anyone that will listen to you. You can change laws. You can work with legislators, and I know that there are legislators in your state that are like-minded. And again, it takes a unified community to do that. My suggestion has been to form a nonprofit. We didn't start out as a sophisticated organization. We started out with 5 ladies around a kitchen table who saw that something needed to be done. And out of that grew a board that was stronger. They sat out in front of Food Lion, which is our grocery store, and raised money. They sold t-shirts. They had bake sales. They raised enough money to be able to hire me, and I'm very inexpensive. And then that's when we were able to, when someone is able to devote a full time, their full attention to this issue, that's when we really started to move forward and make progress and get attention and raise funds. and make a difference in the lives of our horses. Right, well, I had to do some tough love for boards. Our board was great, but they kind of said, well, we've always done it this way, and it never worked. And so I sat them down and said, well, what kind of skill sets do we need to be able to move forward? And on our board now, which is 11 people, we have a veterinarian, we have the district attorney, we have the assistant superintendent of schools, we have someone from the college, the local college, we have business owners. We have a woman who owns the Hilton and the Ramada. We are a tourist-driven economy, so we don't have a lot of industry. So we took we have a CPA. So we took a careful look at what are all the skill sets that we need to be successful, and then we went after getting those people to join us and be a part of the board. And I can certainly share, I have bylaws I can share with you. I have all of the protocols and policies that we've developed over the years that I can share with you, and they've all been successful. But we didn't start out as some big, I don't have a cushy office, I have a cat that sits on my desk, but what we did do was be very thoughtful about the group that we put together and the skill sets that they had, so that passion is wonderful, and everyone needs to have it when they're working on wild horse issues. But there's also a lot of skill sets and expertise that needs to be included in the group as well.
Is North Carolina a fenced-out state?
It is not.
How many acres are needed per horse, and how many gallons of water per horse are needed daily?
Again, because I'm not from your area, I can speak for us. Our horses have access to 7,544 acres. Our habitat, again, as I mentioned before, is not, we have maybe one area if we have a nor'easter with a lot of rain, we'll get some grass. But mostly it's sparse and coarse, and our horses eat oak browse and persimmons and acorns. Our 7,544 acres has 707 houses sitting on it, and the beach is a public road, and it supports the herd that we have right now. We've been up to 144. I have never had a starvation issue there. If we did, we have a policy. If we see that we're running out of habitat, we have policies on supplemental feeding and how that would be done, and it would be done by us as the management entity. But we don't have that issue where we are now, and I understand that it's different here. But as far as your environment, I don't think I'm qualified to answer that for you. I can only speak for what we have, and our 7,500 acres full of houses and not tremendous vegetation. Well, you saw our horses in the video. It supports them nicely.
How long did it take to put the program together?
Well, in 1989, it was all volunteer. In 2001, we incorporated as a nonprofit. We were able to hire part-time staff in 2001, and then we went to full-time staff in 2006. And my background is fundraising and nonprofit management, and I'm a horsewoman, so it was a nice marriage of skill sets for me. But I walked into an organization that had very little money and didn't realize that they were supposed to have a license to raise funds in the state of North Carolina, but they were doing it anyway, and didn't have any personnel policy. So everything was kind of a priority, and we needed money. But again, it all boils down to working together. We had a plan, and the plan is the important thing. We made a plan, and we followed it, and it worked. And I can share that plan with you.
Does the Corolla Wild Horse Program generate positive tourism for the area?
Absolutely. Our horses are the #1 tourist attraction on the Outer Banks. They support 9 commercial horse tour companies who rake in millions of dollars. It's just within the last 2 years that I decided that $1 million is a lot of hats and t-shirts and bumper stickers. So we have now started taking what we call the trip of a lifetime, but we take a very small group of people with someone who is very well educated and trained about the horses, and our mission is education. The raising of funds is also a nice collateral benefit, but what happens is people leave changed, and they leave connected with our mission, and they leave understanding why it is so important to protect and preserve these horses, and they come back as members. We have a nationwide membership program. We have both physical adoption and we have symbolic adoption. I have nursing homes, I have school classrooms who pick a horse and they send money to sponsor that horse. And then I send them, and you can do it, we do it every quarter, but you don't have to do it that often. We send them an update and say, oh, here's a picture of Amadeo, and here's how he's doing, and this is what we've done with him. Or your horse Noel got adopted, would you like to choose another horse? And that generates operating funds, and it's a very simple thing to do.
Okay, this is important. Who and why
were the horses rounded up today?
and where did they take them?
I'm not the person to answer that question. I only observed it through binoculars.
Is there any downside to using PZP?
I can say with 100% certainty that there is no downside to using PZP. I'm certified to do it. It's 95% effective. I have a great friend in Allison Turner, who is the park ranger at Assateague National Seashore in Maryland, where they have been studying and using PZP for 20 years. They are the most studied group of horses on the planet, all peer-reviewed science. You can get online, look it up, read it. Social behaviors don't change. It is safe for humans. It's safe for pregnant mares. I have seen, when I came in late 2006, in the summer of 2007, we had 24 foals, and our mortality rate was high. I had teenage mares that looked terrible. I had young mares that were not good moms. Now, in 2014, last year, we had 8 foals. As you could see by the video, our horses look great. The average wild horse, only 1% of wild horses live into their teens. Assateague has one horse that's 33 and 5 or 6 that are in their 20s and look wonderful. And they had 0 foals this year. We have had none so far this year. PZP is humane. It only has to be done once a year after you do the annual shot and the booster. It's cost effective, and if I can do it, anybody can do it. I've never shot an animal before in my life, but I can do, I'm a good shot with a pistol. I went and took the certification training at the Science and Conservation Center with Dr. J. Kirkpatrick, who is the most knowledgeable, who has saved more horses' lives in this country than probably anybody I know. And I know that I can't think of Ricardo's last name, but I know that that Ricardo Ortiz and some of his fellow residents of the Pueblo have been there and taken the course. So there is no reason not to use PZP.
Okay, me next. Mm-hmm.
How would you suggest we deal with government officials and agencies who have opposed humane wild horse treatment and solutions?
Well, you got to kill them with kindness, for starters. And you have to form alliances. It's good to be assertive. but you got to pick your battles. And you have to have your facts. And you have a program like the Corolla Wild Horse Fund to use as a precedent. It works. You can use Shackelford Banks. They're managed by the National Park Service. That's a bureau of the Department of Interior. BLM is a bureau of the Department of Interior. There are examples all over this country of horse herds that are being managed effectively and humanely. And you need to get the ear of the people who have the power.
What is the annual funding requirement of your organization's income to expenses?
Well, right now our budget is $639,000, but that's because we have 2 mission-related stores. I have 5 full-time employees now and 7 seasonal employees. But when I came in 2006, we had already been a nonprofit for 5 years, and the budget then was around $79,000, and that was primarily for staff. Our horse management budget at this point in time is around $51,000, but again, we're much further down the road than y'all are. You're not going to have to go out and raise $1 million to do this. Again, putting together a management plan will guide you. When you come to consensus on what are your goals, then you can make a budget and stick to your budget and see how you're going to be able to meet those goals and raise the money to do that. But the money's out there. The support is out there. People in this country love our wild horses. Most people.
I can't read Placitas.
We should have placed that one after the last one.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
What are the habitat and ecosystem differences between Placitas and your community in North Carolina?
I would say the major difference would be the availability of water, because we're surrounded by water. We have the Atlantic Ocean on one side, and we have the Currituck Sound on the other. The barrier island at its narrowest point is 1/4 mile wide. At its widest point, it's 2 miles wide. We have a very fragile ecosystem because we are a barrier island. We have a very harsh climate. It's very hot and humid in the summer. The insects are terrible. We've got lots of snakes. And in the wintertime, we have nor'easters that sometimes last for 3 days that are worse than hurricanes because they sit out there and blow 50 to 60 mile an hour winds. They strip the sea oats that the horses eat. But I would say probably the availability of water, because the Currituck Sound is a freshwater estuarine system. And so generally there are quite a few water sources. As far as the forage goes, there's more similarities than differences.
Okay, go ahead.
Are the horses in Placitas truly wild?
I don't know that I can say that our horses are truly wild, because they're contained between 2 sound-to-sea fences 11 miles apart on 7,500 acres. But they are untamed and they're free. So I'm not sure, and when you look at our government's definition of what a wild horse is, and there's lots of scientific papers written about that. Dr. Kirkpatrick, who I have mentioned earlier, has done a wonderful paper on horses as wildlife. They are native to North America. You know, I'm not citing anything that there aren't a million studies for. They evolved here. For whatever reason, they disappeared 10,000 years ago with the woolly mammoth. They went across the Bering Strait. They flourished in Europe, and they were returned home by the Spaniards. We wish that we could treat our horses more wildly, but I manage in a fishbowl because I have 50 to 60,000 new visitors there every week. And the first time they see a horse with a boo-boo, they're on the phone, and it's just the way it is. We respond. And if I can treat a horse in the field, I do. I assess it. If it's just something that I know is okay, then I get back to the person and say, oh, we looked at it and he's going to be okay. If it's a critical injury, then I have to capture it and bring it off, and then it becomes our responsibility both physically and financially once it's off the beach. And I sort of lost my train of thought as to what the question was. Oh, wild, yeah, wild. We tell our visitors when they come Our horses are used to seeing people. They see them all the time. But that doesn't make them tame. It makes them tolerant. And I know when I go to work with them, for some reason, there's plenty of wild in there. Plenty of wild.
How did you get past political lack of interest?
I'm very persistent. And we basically went from obscurity in 2001 to Capitol Hill in 2008. So it's a matter of making alliances and being politically savvy, which I was not when I first came. I certainly have had to become that. But those allies are important to have. And that's what you need to set your sights on. And again, I keep going back to the management plan. You need a plan. And when you have that plan put together, now you've got something concrete that you can take to legislators and say, this is our plan. This is what we want to do. How can you help us? And I found an ear in Congressman Walter Jones. And he's like a dog with a bone with our legislation. And I have no doubt that if anybody can get this legislation through the Senate, it will be Walter Jones, because he's the one who said, Karen, you need to go to the North Carolina, I would have never thought of this alone. He said, you need to go to the North Carolina General Assembly, ask them to pass a resolution, and give it to ask the Senate to pass the legislation. And so that's what as soon as I get back, that's my #1 goal. But you need to create those powerful alliances, and they're there. You just need to look. You need to do your research online, you need to visit your legislators, and you need to tell them your story. But you got to have a plan.
And I'm sorry, you've already answered this, but did you have to deal with a community subgroup of people, like here, obsessed with having the horses exterminated, who have co-opted local sheriff, county agencies, livestock board, etc., to support illegal horse removal? If yes, how, what, and how did you manage that? And if no, what legal political methods can you suggest?
I have not, but my predecessors did. Earlier in my talk, I mentioned that the horses were, we had 5,000 horses all up and down the Outer Banks. And then as the island became more of a resort, the horses became squeezed more and more. And in 1938, a bounty was put on wild horses when the federal government began to buy up the land for Cape Hatteras National Seashore. That caused an uproar. That was stopped. But then the horses still kept getting pushed further and further north. 16 miles south of where our horses are is the town of Duck. It's a village of Duck, actually. And until 1985, the paved road stopped right there. And so for the next 27 miles, it was nothing but sand and a few houses. In 1985, they paved the road from Duck to Corolla. And now suddenly we've got shopping centers and houses and horses. And there was a little bit of division in the community as to should we move them north where it's four-wheel drive only. A lot of people felt that this was their home, they should stay here. Then you had a faction that said, but they're getting hit by cars. But again, it's that coming together in the fire station and coming up with a mutual plan. And they worked together, and when I talked about getting the permits and raising the funds in North Carolina, we had to go to CAMA, who manages all things seashore, in order to get permission to install a sound-to-sea fence. And the fence that you saw briefly in the video with the big pilings and the cabling, that had to have federal permission, and that we have a permit for that has to be renewed every year. So there was a lot of work, and it took, I think, the fund between, let's say, 1989 and 1995 to get that permission. But again, the forming of the nonprofit, the education, brought the community all together and on board and working for a common goal because they had a plan. And so then the horses were all moved up there in 1997.
How did the population drop from 5,000 to 101? This is a big drop with only 20 killed on the highway.
Well, I think I answered that when I said in 1938 they put a bounty on wild horses.
What kind of surveys did you do to enable the community to show support?
Again, that would be my predecessors. And I know since I've been there, since 2006, we really haven't had to do surveys because the horses have been up and moved. I spend a lot of time in the community speaking to community groups, not just in this county, the county I live, but in the contiguous counties. And I do have the advantage of being also in a tourist-driven economy. So I have people from all over the country coming through. We have a wild horse museum, which is part of our stores. And so we have an opportunity to educate people and engage them in our mission. And so we have supporters from California, from Texas, from Montana, from Maine. My horses that I have adopted out live from Texas to Maine. I have 8 horses in Texas. We also do an off-site breed conservation program that I forgot to mention. We are a hurricane state, and in the event that we would have a hurricane the magnitude of Katrina, we'd all be gone, including the horses. So we have a site in Karma Farms in Marshall, Texas, Mill Swamp Indian horses in Smithfield, Virginia, and the Boys Home in Covington, Virginia, where horses that have had to be taken off the beach for one reason or another are bred domestically in an effort to conserve the breed.
Who donated the land for the horses?
The land, there is no donated land for the horses. Our horses live on a combination of 331 acres of state land, which is the North Carolina Estuarine Research Reserve. Then there are 3 sections of the Currituck National Wildlife Refuge, which is owned by United States Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of the Interior. They are not contiguous. So we've got Estuarine Research Reserve, 331 acres, a section of Wildlife Refuge. Then we have a housing development called Swan Beach. Then we have another little section of refuge. Then we have another housing development called North Swan Beach and a big housing development called Corova. And then there's the North Carolina-Virginia line. And on the other side of that is Falls Cape State Park, which is the Virginia State Park. So the horses roam state, federal, and private land. 70% of the land that the horses roam is privately owned.
How do we manage horses when the neighboring sovereign pueblos have horses that are not controlled?
I'm not sure what you mean about not controlling, because I know they have taken and graduated from the PZP course at Zoo, Montana. I mean, I just met with him this morning, and I'm jealous because his dart delivery gun is the Excalibur, which I would really, really, really like to have. And we had a very open discussion about, I mean, they are getting ready to initiate, they're just waiting for their PZP to arrive, and then they're going to begin population control. So I'm not sure I understand that question.
Other than native vegetation, is there any supplemental feeding, and what kind of control from residential areas do these horses have from grazing?
They graze in people's yards. They eat their pansies. Some people know that there's a particular plant or flower that are favorites of the horses, and so they plant them. People plant grass in their yards for the horses. We do not have to supplementally feed our horses at this point. We may at some time, and so we have instituted some policies about that and some controls. We have the same problem. I mean, we have terrible problems, because we've got 50,000 new people every week to educate. And they think that one apple isn't going to do anything. But not only do we have habituation issues, we have colic issues. Things that are not native to horses' diets, oftentimes, at the very least, give them colic, at the very worst, kill them. And we've had deaths. So we spend a lot of time on the beach educating people, getting it into rental brochures. I have a video that runs on cable channel 12, which is the TV thing that everybody switches on when they go on vacation. And there's me saying, please don't feed the horses. You've got to stay 50 feet away. Sometimes when I'm on the beach, people will say, oh, you're that lady on television. We use every avenue that we can think of. We do PSAs. We have brochures. I wish that I had enough to give to everybody here, but I've been traveling, and everywhere I stopped, I left off more brochures, and so by the time I got here, I was a little depleted. But we do have a website that you can go on, Corolla Wild Horses. It's simple, CorollaWildHorses.com. And you can get on there and look at all the materials that we have for people. We get 1.2 million hits on our website annually because people Google wild horse or Corolla wild horses, and boom, they go right there. And so all the information is there for them to read about the history, social behaviors, the laws, and how you're supposed to behave when you're up there.
Okay. Has there ever been any litigation in North Carolina to support the program?
No, we've never had to sue anybody, I'm happy to say. We certainly have had lots of people arrested for things that they do, but we've never been in a position where we've had to enter into litigation. I've been very fortunate that way. And again, I think because we've been successful in gaining support of both local, state, and federal governments and legislators, that's been very, very helpful and very powerful.
Can you tell us what effect the Corona Wild Horse Protection Act, H.R. 126, would have here in New Mexico? And with less than a 20% chance of passage, how will it find support?
Oh, somebody was on that silly PopVox website that says if you look at any legislation, it's going to tell you. It said that about, I think it gave it less, I think it had a 7% chance of going through the House, and it passed unanimously. H.R. 126, I think, sets a precedent. And that's part of the problem of getting it through, because it's sort of a little Pandora's box that we're opening up here. But what it does is it mandates that the Corolla Wild Horse Fund be allowed to manage the Corolla horses at a scientifically determined number to maintain genetic and physical health, and gives us the power to make those decisions. It also gives us the fiduciary responsibility. We're not asking the government for a penny to manage those horses. I don't want the government to manage them. We're doing a great job now. But we have, in the form of United States Fish and Wildlife Service, their mission is to protect native wildlife. And because wild horses are considered by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a non-native feral invasive species, they don't want them on their land. And that's fine. They're putting up fences. I'm okay with that. But the number, the herd size, is what needs. I've tried every which way but loose to. I've provided peer-reviewed science, but they just don't want to be confused with the facts. So that's why we have the legislation now, because no other avenues worked. But I think that legislation would be a landmark for wild horses everywhere.
How do you address complaints that the horses are causing the severe damage to the soil and water?
Well, we hear that a lot, too. And since I've been here, I've driven around a lot. And that's one of the similarities I think that you also have with us, because I hear that. But when I see a landscape that is completely denuded and looks like Mars from gravel mining, the horses didn't do that. We did it. where I am is lots of development. I'm not anti-development, but there's a way to do these things in a way that's respectful of the environment, that's respectful of the citizens, and it's respectful of the wildlife. I saw a lot of things here that were not respectful for any of those things. And I have those same things happening in Kerala. So it's a constant battle. But it's not the horses. If you want to talk about impact to the land, it's humans.
Many of us understand that New Mexico is a fence-out state. If the horses are in residential areas, doesn't that apply as well if some find the horses on their property objectionable and others do not? Probably already answered that.
Could you say that again? I didn't quite get the question.
Yeah,
It was kind of more like a statement.
Many of us understand that New Mexico is a fence-out state. If the horses are in residential areas, doesn't that apply as well if some find the horses on their property?
Objectionable.
Thank you.
Well,
And others do
I'm
not.
still not understanding the question, except that I go back to that statement. It is a fence-out state, so if you don't want them on your property, fence them out. Pretty simple.
Can the wild horse haters be educated? Can the wild horse haters be educated?
I think everyone can be educated, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be internalized. You can educate, and you got to keep educating. You can't stop educating, and you just keep going and never give up and hope maybe somehow some fact will sink in there. But you can't make people change who they are, but you can continue to educate, and you should never, ever stop doing that.
What are the first organizational steps? Your program at this point is quite encompassing. Where do you start after the stakeholders have been gathered? And question 2, how did you get a common vision? Were there those who wanted the horses removed rather than managed?
Oh, yes, yeah. And again, that predates me, but I've got lots of written material to that effect. But the people who wanted the horses outnumbered the people who did not. And we still all have to agree to sit down and talk. But in our country, majority rules. And not, at least the last time I looked, majority rules. And it takes cool heads, and it takes patience, and it takes perseverance, and it takes openness. And I'm guilty, like everyone else sometimes, of digging my heels in sometimes and not always hearing the other side. But we managed to work that out because there were many people back in the 80s who thought that moving the horses up into the four-wheel drive area was the worst thing ever. I shared a video with Joan called Wild in Kerala that was narrated by Charles Kuralt and was finished in 1997 after the horses were moved up there. And they interviewed various people who had varying opinions, and why should they be moved up there? This is their home. And the bottom line is everybody has got to think about what is best for the horses. And that always has to be first and foremost in the decisions that you make.
Last question. Would you like to move to Placitas?
I don't know, I have to ask my husband. What do you think, honey? You have such a beautiful, this is just absolutely breathtaking area here. I mean, I've been to Albuquerque, but it was at a conference and I really didn't get an opportunity to fully see what you have here. And it's so unique and it's so beautiful. And you are unique and your horses are unique. But again, if we can do it, so can you, because our community in Kerala is very diverse. It's made up mostly of people who have come from other places, and then people who have lived there all their lives. And we just kept working at it until we could agree on what was best for the horses. And that has turned out to be what is best for us as well. That's it. All right. You're excused.